Abba Yahuah, I just want to thank you so much, my Father, for this day. I thank you, Abba Yahuah, for this lesson and for the depth that you want to bring us in the understanding of where we are looking at a genealogy. And many times when we look at a genealogy, it's so easy for us to just skip through all these names and skip through everything because it's so boring and it's of no importance. But Abba Yahuah, I just want to thank you because this is like you said to me. Unless you understand the first few chapters of the book of Genesis, you will not understand exactly what has happened in where we stand today and in what is unfolding upon the earth, and to understand that this is a journey. And as we've started right from Genesis chapter 1, that we have understood that there is so many nuggets of gold that are unfolding before us in terms of the revelation that you want to show us where mankind has gone wrong and where mankind has been distributed to, and exactly what has happened in mankind's life in terms of understanding what happened in the garden with Adam and Eve, understanding what has happened with Cain and Abel, understanding from the time of the genealogy, the righteous genealogy, right down until Noah, understanding what has happened in the time of Enoch with the fallen angels and what happened there, understanding Enoch and the coming into an ark, a protection from the flood time, and now being able to embark on a journey of the understanding of the different tribes and how the tribes are significant, and the difference in exactly when we understand today where some of these tribes have been dispersed to, and today the understanding that we are going to understand Nimrod and his kingdom, and the understanding of the land of Canaan and the curse that came upon Canaan, and to understand that you are still merciful. You are so merciful and you are so kind that you will always give people time to repent. And yet people choose not to repent and they choose not to turn back to you. But I praise and I thank you, Abba Yahuah, that you will open up the mind of our understanding, that you will open up our hearts, that you will open us up in order to be able to understand your deeper revelations. And how amazing that we can start in the book of Genesis and end in the book of Revelation and understand that there has been a pattern from inception to kingdoms that have always been running. From the time Adam and Eve came out of the garden, there has been two kingdoms, and still today there is two kingdoms. And so we either serve the kingdom of our flesh and the flesh things and the things of the world, or we will either serve the kingdom, your kingdom and your way. And so I praise and I thank you for this time, Abba. I thank you that you will open up the mind of our understanding, that you will open up our hearts, that you are the one that is embarking with us on a journey and taking us step by step, so that we may be able to truly come into the deeper revelation of our faith, of where we understand Christianity, but where have we gone so wrong? And what we need to come back to now is to come back to those children that need to be founded on truth, because it's only the truth of your word that sets your people free. And we need to come back to the place of intimacy with you, where we fell in the Garden of Eden. And so, Abba Yahuah, I just want to thank you that I just commit this lesson to you. I commit this time to you. Father, you know that we are very vulnerable here with the signal, but I pray that you are the one that will take charge in this time and just let the signal hold, and let us be able to bring this teaching forth from this place where you have chosen for us to be, this beautiful place of our nation. In Yahushua's name I praise and I thank you for this. Amen. Amen. So we praise Abba Father for what he is doing in this time, and we just recap a little bit in terms of having to look at the genealogy. And so we looked basically at Japheth's genealogy, and we covered Japheth's genealogy like Gomer and Magog and Madai and Yawan and Tabul and Meshech and Tyrus. And we understood that most of these genealogy, like Tyrus and Meshech and Tabul, these are places in Turkey. And then we look at Madai, and this is basically Iran. And we look at Magog, and Magog is basically the southern part of Asia, which today is known as Afghanistan. But when we look at Asia, I suppose it could be the greater part of Asia too, but the land of Gog was the mountain, basically, of Central Asia, which we look at Afghanistan. And interesting how Afghanistan is playing such an important part right now. And then we had a look at, Gomer, and Gomer was also modern city of Turkey, which we know where the book of Galatians was written. And so we had a look at the sons of Gomer, and we look at Ashkenaz, and we looked at Riphath, and we looked at Togarmah. And when we look at Gomer, each of them basically also came from a different place. And Ashkenaz, we look at that they were, it means a man as sprinkled, fire as scattered, and that is basically the western part of Germany. And yet, in the land of Israel, we know that there's a tribe called the Ashkenazi Jews, and they pride themselves as being the original Jews that would come from the house of Shem. But we understand that Ashkenaz basically comes from the tribe of Japheth, which is not from the tribe of Shem. But they were told to dwell in the tents of Shem. And so we then did an in-depth look at the sons of Yawan. And interesting how we said, that Japheth really only mentioned two tribes to look into, and that was Gomer and Japheth. And how interesting, because Gomer was going to make a difference, because it was going to be the people that are going to come from Poland and Czechoslovakia and Germany and Armenia. And that was really going to make up your tribes were going to be the tribes that today also inhabit the land of Israel. A lot of them have come from those areas of Poland and Czechoslovakia and Germany and Armenia. And then we had a look at Yawan, and Yawan was so interesting because Yawan is the people that would come from Cyprus, from Greece. And how interesting how these four sons of Yawan, Elisha and Tarshish and Kittim and Dodanim, they were basically the people that would come from Greece. And how interesting that if we had a look at Yawan, the root of the word Yawan is basically the root for wine. It's called wine, which it clearly tells you fermented wine, which is intoxication. And so we understand that from this people group of Yawan, which is the intoxication of the wine, came a people that really, Elisha, which was from Cyprus, which was the god of the coming one. So which was the god of the coming one? So at the end of the day, we understood many gods that was going to come out of Yawan. because we looked at the Greek mythology and we went into detail in understanding Zeus, in understanding Apollo, in understanding Athena, their sister, and understanding the god of wine, Dionysus, the god of wine, and of theatre. And when we had a look at the detail that we needed to cover in terms of Yahuah, we understood that this is a lot of where Christianity is basically drinking from the wine, this intoxication of a lot of the Greek mythology that was given to us from the time of, which is really Paul did a lot of work into Athens and into places like your Corinth and places like Philippi and places like Thessaloniki, the book of Thessalonians and basically Corinthians. And in all these places he was up against this Greek mythology, up against this doctrines that were coming mixed in with, bringing in other deities, bringing in these gods. And if we looked at their temple, and that is why we put a photo on the group of the temple for you to see that these people were huge people, to have these huge temples. And so they were part of the Nephilim giants that would have been upon the earth. And so we had a deep look at that. And then we had a look at Ham's descendants, and so we looked at Cush, and we saw that Cush meant black, and we understood that Cush is called the area of Ethiopia, but it was the greater Ethiopia, but actually Cush would have been more the area that we would have understood today as being Sudan, and Mitzrayim, and they were that Mitzrayim known as double straits, and that's Egypt. And then there's Put, and that's North Africa. So those were the sons of Ham, which was Cush, and which was Mitzrayim, and Put, and then Canaan. And then we had a look at Cush, that Seba is Ethiopia, and Havilah is Saudi Arabia, and Sabta is all those areas basically making up a lot of that northern Africa side. And then we had a look at the sons of Rama, which is Shiva, which means 7. And then Dedan, which is the low country. And basically from Cush came Nimrod. And that is why today we are going to really focus on Nimrod, because we need to understand, just as last week we focused on Yahuah, today we need to focus on Nimrod, because Nimrod is where we understand Revelation and we understand Babylon. We need to understand Nimrod and where Nimrod comes from. So we are going to have a look at Genesis chapter 10, which we touched on last week, but now we're going to go into a little bit more detail. And so it basically talks about Cush having had all these sons. He had Seba, and he had Havilah, Sabta, Rama, Sabteka, and Dedan, and then Shiva. And then we see in verses 8 it says, and Cush brought forth Nimrod. So it looks like this would have been his last born. And sorry, he began to be a mighty one on the earth, and he was a mighty hunter before Yahuah. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before Yahuah. So if we have a look at the name Nimrod, Nimrod means rebellion or valiant. So we understand that Nimrod, his name means rebellion. So there, from this man, there was going to come a rebellion. And understand, he was a mighty hunter. He was valiant. So Nimrod was a man that was a mighty warrior. He became powerful. He became great. He became a strong man. He became a mighty one. Now, a mighty one could even be like, like a king, a mighty man of valor, a mighty man, a strong man, a mighty warrior. And we must understand that from this rebellion is going to come a lot of the witchcraft that we understand today, and a lot of what has been brought into, again, our Christian faith. So we have a look and we see Nimrod brought forth, it says, let's continue to read in verses 10, and in the beginning of his reign. So we understand that he brought forth a reign. He brought forth a kingdom. He brought forth a dominion. He brought forth a sovereignty. So in the beginning of his reign. So that word reign is basically a kingdom, a dominion, a sovereignty. In the beginning of his reign was Babel. So the very first city that he starts up is a city called Babel. And this Babel means confusion or mixing. So from this Babel, there is going to be a confusion. There's going to be mixing. There's going to be mingling. And there's going to be confusion. And it's to mix oneself, to mix. That's the first city that he brings, that he builds. Then there is Erech. Now, Erech means length, it means make long, it means to prolong, it means to live with, it means to live long and to tarry. And we need to look at this because each one of these cities is going to make up a meaning. And then we've got Akkad. So then he brings Akkad. Akkad means subtle. It means strength. It means a fortress. So these were the first three cities. Now, when we look at these first three cities, what did Nimrod do? Listen carefully. His reign was to subtly strengthen and prolong and lengthen, to live with confusion, mixing, and mingle. That is what you take from the three cities that are there. Erech, Babel, Erech, and Akkad. So when you look at these three cities, it's going to be his reign, because he's going to subtly he's going to subtly strengthen, and he's going to prolong, and he's going to lengthen, because this has gone on a long time. If you talk about prolong and if you talk about lengthen, it goes right until the book of Revelation, so you can understand how long this is going to be prolonged and how lengthy this is going to be. And so he brings people to live with confusion and mixing. Then, if we have a look at the next city that he builds, which is Calneh. Calneh is the fortress of Anu. Okay, so what is the fortress of Anu? Now, if you go look and you see, this Anu was a Sumerian from Mesopotamia, sky god. So this was now when you are going to want to see that to be able to go to the sky god. Now, this is going to make a little bit of sense to us when we understand that he's going to build a tower. And where does he want to build it to? Into the heavens, because he's trying to go into the sky god. And this is the sky god Anu. And this sky god was the god over many gods. And he was known as the god of the kings. And he was also known as the god of the yearly calendar. Now, I found that so interesting, because my goodness, if there's one thing that we have confusion over in the body of Messiah, is a calendar. That is why the Father set up a calendar right in the book of Genesis, in Genesis chapter 7 and chapter 8. As Noah enters into an ark, he's setting up a calendar, and that calendar is going to be seen to be brought through, right through, especially by the time we get to Moses, when Father instates that calendar. And we will go into detail into this in the months ahead as we go a little bit deeper into our walk with him, with the Father, because we understand that even in where we live today, we have a calendar. And this calendar is a yearly calendar starting on the 1st of January, ending on the 31st of December, which is so foreign to the Father's calendar. Because the Father's calendar starts in March in Aviv, according to Exodus chapter 12, verses 1. And so I need you to understand this, because this is the God Anu that is going to be able to be already this God that is going to bring the destruction on the earth throughout the generations, right until the time that we are going to look at Babylon, and when Babylon needs to fall in the book of Revelation. And he was also known as the father of evil spirits and demons. Important for us to know, because at the end of the day, those in Babylon are those that are going to be filled with the evil spirits and the demons. And we are going to read that when we're going to look at Revelation chapter 18. So the people that is going to be able to be these people that are going to be part of a kingdom of Nimrod are going to be a rebellious people. And they have a dominion. They have their own kingdom. They have their kingdom. They have their dominion. They have their reign. And they have their sovereignty on the earth. And who is their father? Satan. And this was the god already that they served, which was the sky god of Anu. And that was the fortress of Anu. So this is like a fortress. So, if we then have a look at, it says, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. So when we have a look at the land of Shinar, it means the country of two rivers. Interesting. What are those two rivers? Because this would have been, in that time, it would have been like Mesopotamia, which later became Babylonia. See, Babylon comes up again, Babylonia, and Chaldea. Remember the Chaldeans. So when Abraham is going to come out, he's going to come out of where? The land of the Chaldeans. So when we get to Abraham, we're going to see this. And this is the land of Shinar that is between the two rivers, which is the Tigris and the Euphrates River. And who are those people in this modern day? In this modern day, you look at none other than Erech. Who are the ones that want to be able to destroy Israel, Iran and Iraq? So it's Iraq, it's Kuwait, it's Turkey, and it's Syria. Those are the nations that are between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. And interesting, if we look at these four countries today, they are people that you will battle to find a believer in those three nations, because they've very much been taken over by the Muslim nation, the Muslims. They're Muslim nations. And so when we have a look at this again, and we have a look at now, again, Babel, Erech, Akkad, Calneh, let's see what it means. So from mixing and confusion, so Nimrod brought about mixing and confusion. That started with Babel. So from mixing and confusion, they set up a belief system to Anu. Because Babel, the very first city, was what brought about the confusion and the mixing. So from the mixing and the confusion, by the time we get to Calneh, we are going to get the belief system of Anu. So the center of this mixing was believing in the god Anu, and he was a god over many gods. So the belief system of believing also in multiple gods. Then when we get to Genesis chapter 10 verses 11, it says, and that land he went to Ashur, and then built Nineveh. So Ashur means a step, to advance, to lead on, and that Ashur we know as being Assyria. Then Nineveh. Now interesting, Nineveh is the abode of Ninus. That's what Nineveh means. Nineveh means the abode of Ninus, which is basically the capital of the ancient kingdom of Assyria. So Nineveh was the capital of the ancient city of Assyria. And you know, the Father was so faithful, because we know that in the time of Jonah, Father sent him to Nineveh. And it was because he didn't want to go to Nineveh, because he knew those Assyrian were wicked people. He instead went on a ship to Tarshish, to Tarshish, and then was thrown overboard and was swallowed by a large fish, a whale. But eventually the Father takes him to Nineveh to be able to bring a message for the people to repent. Now, many people, if you go look in history, they say that that abode of Ninus, because Ninus was also, it was kings. It was a king called Ninus. So there was a king called Ninus. Now, many of the researchers say that Ninus could have been Nimrod himself, because Ninus was a king. So who was the king over this Nineveh from the beginning? Because who was the one that was in charge of all these lands, of Babel, of Erech, of Akkad, of Calneh, of the land of Shinar, all of these, Ashur, Nineveh, none other than Nimrod, because Nimrod was the one that was the mighty warrior that conquered these lands and that birthed these lands. Then you get Rehoboth. So then we continue to read, and Rehoboth, Ir, and Kilah. Rehoboth, Ir means a broad. It means broad or open way or wide paths. Doesn't that say something? So when we look at, by the time he builds Rehoboth, now that means that city, because Ir is a city. So Rehoboth, Ir, the city of Rehoboth, was broad. It was open. it was wide paths. So let's see. So this city opened the way to the broad way, to the wide path of destruction, of the mixing of the seed. So we see each city brings some form of, one city brings forth the next city that is going deeper and deeper into building this kingdom, this dominion, this reign, and the sovereignty. So now when we look at this, it says, let's start from the beginning. So there was strengthening, the living and prolonged of the confusion and the mixing, so that he was able to change the narrow path. So by bringing confusion and mixing, he brought a strengthened, living and prolonged confusion mixing, and he's changed the narrow path of the way that the people were serving Abba Yahuah, and only serving Abba Yahuah, to now being able to serve a sky god of Anu that was going to eventually be the god that was going to be the father of the demonic spirits that would then birth the other gods that would come after this. And that is why by the time that we get to Abraham, we are going to understand that by this time they had many little gods, because this is what Nimrod brought about. So if we have a look then, when we have a look at, and he brought forth Kilah. Now Kilah means strength, firm, to be complete, maturity of age. So by the time he brings forth Kilah, this is now being even more strengthened. He's bringing his kingdom to become more firm, more complete, and he's bringing it into its maturity of the full age of maturity. Understand, we're talking about a kingdom that is being birthed here. And so by the time we get to the last city, which is Rezin, which is between Nineveh and Kilah, the great city. Now Rezin was a bridle. It means bridle. It means restrains. It means restraining. So what is a bridle? It's something that you would put on a horse, isn't it? And where you need a restrain. You restrain people. You put restraints on them. You put a bridle on them, which means you will control them. So it was a kingdom that would eventually control man under his strength and not be reliant on Abba Yahuah, but be reliant on man and man's strength. And what man had to be able to give this kingdom. Because at the end of the day, everything that we see about this kingdom is everything to do with the fact that eventually this kingdom that he sets up is going to be a kingdom that is going to more and more strengthen man in his own image. Because it was for man to now become a mighty warrior. It was for man to become powerful and great in its own eyes, and to be able to walk on a wide path, to be able to no longer stay on the narrow path of Abba Yahuah's way that was given to us from Adam all the way down to Noah. And Noah had given his sons, which would have been Shem and Japheth, would have known the way. But by the time we get to Nimrod, he starts to raise up as a king. And this king of Ninus, which is the abode. So he starts up his own abode. He starts up his own kingdom. And this is a kingdom that's going to be directly in rebellion against Abba Yahuah, because that is what Nimrod means. And this is now where we see this rebellion that is going to go on the earth, where a kingdom is going to set up, where he is going to be able to bring people under his sway because of the strength, because of the fact that he prolongs their living in confusion and mixed seed. And he takes them from a narrow path where they served Abba Yahuah into a broad path of many gods. And that is why, if we look at the scripture in Matthew, let's just go look at Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7, and if we have a look at verses 13, and it says, enter in through the narrow gate, because the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter in through it. So do you see, by the time we came to the place of Rehoboth, when he built that city, he was opening up the paths wide for people to be able to follow in this broad path, in this path that is going to bring them further and further into the mixing of the seed, and eventually they were going to come to full maturity in the strength of that mixing seed by Kila. And by the time they come to resin, they are restraining. There's restraints put on them that this is the only way that they know how to go. And yet he turns around and he says in verses 14, because the gate is narrow and the way is hard-pressed, which leads to life, and there are few who find it. So you see, the Father's way is a narrow way. The Father's way is not a broad path. The Father's way is not a way that is broad. The Father's way is a narrow path. And this way is hard-pressed, because you have to submit and surrender to him. But the broad way that is given by this rebellion of Nimrod is a way that everything goes. You become your own God. And you are serving yourself as your God, because you have your own strength. You go your own way. And instead of you serving Abba Yahuah and in his way that he wants to be served, you become a God unto yourself. And you are seated on a throne. And you now serve the kingdoms of the world. And the kingdoms of the world is to be able to enhance everything that is to be able to give you pleasure. But what you don't understand, it's under restraints. And this is what the kings of the world are doing today. They gave us all the pleasures for all these years, and now they're restraining us and putting us in a box and say, well, we're not going to take your freedom from you unless you bow down a little bit more to our systems. So let's go look at Revelation 18, because then we're going to understand this kingdom and dominion and reign of Nimrod. So we go to Revelation 18 from verses 1, because we need to understand, where have we gone wrong? You see, if we do not understand where we've gone wrong, so with the sons of Yahuah, we have gone wrong. Then with the son of Cush, Nimrod, again, we've gone wrong. And we are a people that are sapping from these two kingdoms that have come about. Well, one is an actual kingdom. Yahuah, we know what came down from there, which basically the origin of everything that was already setting up there eventually came from Nimrod. because it was the kingdom that was being set up. And so we see, and it says, and after this I saw another messenger coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was lightened with his esteem. And he carried with a mighty voice, saying, Babel. Now Babel, if you look at Babel, that is Babylon. Babel the Great is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons. So remember, what was the god Anu? What was the god Anu? He was the god of the evil spirits and the demons. So Babel eventually becomes a place of demons, a haunt of even unclean spirits. There you go, the confirmation of Anu. Anu is the father of the evil spirits and demons, which goes back to Babel. And so this Babel became a place of demons and the haunt of every unclean spirit and a haunt of every unclean and hated bird, because all the nations have drank from the wine of the wrath of her whoring. So understand, this kingdom started from the time of Nimrod. That was going to be the rebellion that was going to be against the Father. So there's always, see the rebellion that happened when the fallen angels fell upon the earth, there's a rebellion. And this is the rebellion of when Hasatan and his demons come upon the earth, and now they are going to bring destruction upon the earth for a times and half a time. Written of in Revelation chapter 12. And so we need to understand that this is what he's talking about here, in terms of we must understand, where did this kingdom start? This kingdom didn't start now. This kingdom didn't start 50 years ago. This kingdom started right from the time of Nimrod, because this was the rebellion, and he was valiant. He was going to be very powerful. This is a powerful kingdom because he was mighty, he was powerful, and he was great. And he was going to become a hunter. And what is he a hunter of? He's going to be a hunter of men. He's a hunter of men because his key plan, because he serves the father, Anu, which is the sky god, and that would have been Hasatan himself. And everything about that is to bring rebellion. And who are we in rebellion against? Rebellion against the Father and the Father's ways. And that is already what he started in the Garden of Eden. And now we're seeing this, the same plan coming down again. Because all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her whoring, and the sovereigns of the earth have committed whoring with her. And the merchants of the earth have become rich through the power of her riotous living. So understand, we have kings, sovereigns of this earth right now, that control this world that we are living in right now, and they have become rich at the expense of the people. They're bringing destruction upon the people, and by destroying people, they are becoming rich. And that's what we need to understand. This is the fight that we've got going on right now. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues." So you see, in this kingdom of this rebellion of Nimrod, there will be plagues. Because these are people that are in rebellion, and they are the ones controlling the world, and they are the ones bringing about these plagues. This plague that we are facing right now is a formulated thing by man. This was not of the Father. This is of man. But the Father allows things. Man formulated this to bring about their plan. And what is the plan? to put restraints, to put restraining, to put like a bridle on us so that we can become those that they will control. Because that was the end city, Rezin. So the last city was a city, Rezin, which was going to be where eventually it's all about the control of man, controlling of mankind. Because ultimately that is what Hasatan wants. Hasatan wants to be able to become ruler over the people. He wants to take the place of Yahuah. Because her sins have piled up to reach the heaven, and Yahuah has remembered her unrighteousnesses. So they are unrighteous. Render to her as she indeed rendered. Render to her as she indeed render, and repay her double according to her works. Now listen to what is there. In the cup which she has mixed for her double. So you see, in the cup which she has mixed, because what is Babylon? What does Babylon mean? Babylon means mixture. It means mixing. It means to mix oneself. It means confusion. It means the confusion, and it means mixing. And that is exactly the cup that she's drinking. She's drinking from this cup of mixture. So we drink a cup that is, we'll say that which is good we call evil, and that which is evil we call good. And this is where the world is right now. The world is being led by, now all of a sudden we are going to rewrite a Bible because the one that we have doesn't cater for certain people. So now we are going to say, no, we need to show love. So now we've got to love the homosexual, so therefore we can marry homosexual couples. It's okay now. And so we will call it good. And that which is good, which is the Father's way, and the Father's commands, the church has twisted to call it evil. So he's put certain parameters in place. He's given us his precepts, his ordinances, and now they call that evil, and they say it's all done away with. It's not important. Because we want to rather have mixed seed. We rather want to drink from the mixed seed of that which caters to our flesh. You see, mankind does not want rules. Mankind wants to be free of everything so that they can become a God unto themselves. And then they want to serve a creator, Abba Yahuah, and then still demand and command that he must do what they want. And that is the kind of religion that we want. We want a religion that we can demand and command what we want. So then, even though we've got a creator, instead of us putting him in his rightful place, instead of us having to sit and raise him up as understanding that he has all authority and power, no. What do? We want him to be able to work in my plan. So I demand and command from him what I want for my life, as opposed to coming to him and saying, what must I do for you, and what do you want out of my life? That we humble before him. But that's not what we've been given. That's not the kind of religion that we want. No, we want a mixture. To still do what we want, follow our own way, but serve the Father in our way. Doesn't work like that. Just like Cain wanted to offer the Father any kind of offering, not the first fruits offering. So let's see what he says in verse 7. And as much as she esteemed herself and lived riotously, so much torture and grief give to her, because in her heart she says, I sit as sovereigness, and I am not a widow, and I do not see mourning at all. Because of this, her plagues shall come in one day. Interesting. These plagues just came in one day when we didn't even see it coming. Death and mourning. So there's still coming death and mourning and scarcity of food. Now that's what's coming. What's coming is now there's going to be death and there's already been much death, and the death is just going to escalate, and then there's going to be much mourning, and eventually we're going to get to the scarcity of food, because that is going to be as the horses of the book of Revelation and the seals are being opened, and the horses. So you've got the white horse, then you've got the red horse, then you've got the black horse, then you've got the pale horse. And by the time we get to the pale horse, there's going to be so much death, and there's going to be scarcity of food, but the scarcity of food already starts with the black horse. And so he says, and shall be burnt up with fire, because Yahuah Eluah, who judges her, is mighty. So we must understand, if we do not come out of this Babylon, and we do not come out of this rebellion, where we are in rebellion against the Father and the Father's ways, you must understand that we are going to receive the judgment that's going to come our way with this Nimrod's whole genealogy of what we see, not genealogy, but Nimrod's fortress of cities that he built that brought about a kingdom, a reign, and a sovereignty. And that is why there are two kingdoms running today. You're either in one or you're either in the other. You're either following the ways of the rebellion of Nimrod, or you are either following the ways of Abba Yahuah, which is the narrow path. And that is why Yahushua spoke in Matthew chapter 7. Let's just go to Matthew chapter 7. Back to Matthew chapter 7, where he turns around and he goes a little bit further in Matthew chapter 7 from verses 21. And what does he say? Matthew chapter 7 from verses 21, he says, not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter into the reign of the heavens, but he who is doing the desire of the Father in the heavens. So only those doing the will of the Father. So you see, we might be doing all these things. We might be saying, Master, Master. We might be saying, Abba, Father, Abba, Father. Many shall say to me in that day. So now look at this. Is this unsaved people? Many shall say to me in that day, Master, Master, we have prophesied. So these will even be maybe prophets prophesying in your name. They cast out demons. So these were people walking in the power and the authority of the Father. They were casting out demons. They were prophesying in your name. And they even done mighty works. My goodness, they might have done the mighty works for the Father, advanced his kingdom mightily in your name. And then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work lawlessness. So when we're going to look at this word lawlessness, we will understand clearly. Means we didn't have rules and a law by which to follow, just the same rules and regulations and precepts and ordinances that was given from Adam all the way down to Noah, and then from Noah given down to his children. But yet from the genealogy of Ham comes Cush, which brings forth Nimrod, which is going to bring forth another kingdom altogether. And this kingdom is a kingdom of rebellion, which means they do not want to abide by the Father's ways and the Father's laws and the Father's rules that He's put in place. Not that man has put in place, because His way is the narrow way. His way is not a broad path. His way is narrow. There is a way that seems right unto man, but its way leads to death. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them shall be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And that is why we've embarked on this journey. We have embarked on this journey for us to be able to know what it means to return back to the Father's way. Because you see, you cannot eat from the tree of life and eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You see, eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, even that which you think is good, in the eyes of the Father is evil because it's mixed seed. Father doesn't want mixing. Father doesn't want mingling. Father doesn't want confusion. Father wants truth in our innermost parts. And that is why it's important for us to have spent time on understanding Cush. Because at the end of the day, if we did not understand not just Cush, but understanding Nimrod, if we did not understand Nimrod, then where would we be? If we do not understand what came out of Nimrod, and next week we are going to see when the tower is going to be able to be built, the Tower of Babel gets built for us to understand, and why the Father then brings a division, because this was very evil that they had done, because by this time mankind has set up a sovereignty, a reign, a dominion, and by this time man has become very wicked. And understand, because Nimrod was a mighty warrior and he was seen as a king, he was leading many people into his kingdom. And this is what we must understand. Mighty people will raise up. Strong people. They're mighty warriors. Strong men and women will raise up to bring people what? Into the truth of his word, or into a little bit more of confusion and mixed seed. Because you see, when we really look at Nimrod and we understand what Nimrod brought about, Nimrod eventually became the father of Tammuz. Tammuz and the mother of the wife of Nimrod was Semiramis, and brought forth a baby Tammuz. And when we understand everything that has to do with Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz, it's going to be the origin of the Catholic Church's doctrine that was the mother of all the churches that started in the beginning, which was Nimrod as being the father, Semiramis as being the Mother Mary, and Tammuz as being like a baby Jesus. So every time you see a Mary statue with a baby in the arms, why would they make Mary to be higher than Yahuah himself? Yahuah is not to be seen as the baby. Yahuah is to be the conquering king, because the mother is elated, because that was the mother of Nimrod. Because what happens is Nimrod dies, he's taken out by a bull, a pig, a bull. And then Semiramis supernaturally falls pregnant with the rays of the sun. And that's why it births sun god worship. So Nimrod becomes the father of everything that has to do with sun god worship. And that is why from the time of Constantine, we think that the Catholic Church, we only take the first pope. The very first pope, which was the first man that brought about the change of the doctrines of them bringing like a one world religion, was Constantine. And interesting, the Pope at the moment is doing exactly that all these generations later, from the time of Constantine. The very first Pope was Constantine, and everything to do with the origins of their faith came from sun god worship that was birthed out of this rebellion of Nimrod and the god Anu. And everything to do with this was going to be the rebellion that was going to come, that was going to birth a mixed religion that was going to take people away from the Father, further and further away from Him. That was going to bring about sun god worship. So we will finish off there tonight, and then next week we start looking at the genealogy of Mitzrayim, and then we will look at Canaan. So Abba Yahuah, I just want to thank you. I thank you for your in-depth look of the understanding that we need to understand where we are today, and where this rebellion has followed us right from the Garden of Eden. And there has always been two kingdoms, and we're either in the one kingdom or we are in the other kingdom. We are either serving Abba Yahuah and his ways, or we either serve you and your ways, or we are serving Hasatan and his ways, and we have gone in this kingdom of rebellion and confusion and mixed seed. And Abba, right now we are in a time of where we are really heading fast and furious towards the end. And that is why you are wanting to be able to remove the scales from your people's eyes. And you are wanting to open up their spiritual ears, and you are opening up their spiritual eyes for them to understand that there are many things that they might think that is right because this is what they've been given, down from their pastors and down from centuries it's been passed down. And what we do not understand is that all of this has started already in the garden and just carried on. Then the world was wiped out, cleaned from anew, and now we see a kingdom being set up again, because Hasatan is not going to stop until he takes as many people into destruction with him. Because his way is to want to be able to kill, steal, and destroy. To bring a people to be under a control. And this is why you said in the word, the whole world is under the sway of the devil. And Abba Yahuah, if we look and we see where we are right now today, have we not had a bridle put in our mouths, where we have been a mask that is controlling us? A mask controls us, whether we are allowed to go into a shop to buy food or not. Without a mask, we can't even enter into a store in this nation. And very soon, without receiving a sting with the venom that Hasatan wants to give us from a serpent seed, we will not be able to get the things that we are supposed to get in this earth in order to survive. Because so much, we are now in the time of that lost city where we are being controlled, where it's to be put restraints on us, and we are being restrained to be controlled by the kings of the earth, which was what was there from the beginning. Abba Yahuah, I ask that you please help us, my Father. Please forgive us, Father, where we go astray in wanting to be powerful of our own doing and wanting to be doing our own thing, and we do not understand that you are not a creator that we can demand and command from. But you are a creator that we are to humble before you to understand that we are here to walk the narrow path that you have placed before us. And we are here to walk in your ways and not in our own. And your kingdom is a narrow path. And that is why few are going to find it. But the broad way has been put before us, and so many are eating from the delicacies and drinking from the wine that has been given by the whore of Babylon. But I ask you, Abba Yahuah, that we will be those now in this hour, in this time, that we will come out of Babylon. We need to come out and break free from the rebellion and from the confusion of the mixed seed and the mixed drink that has been given to us to be rebellious against you, Abba Father. And so I ask you that you help us, my King, that you will embark with us on this journey to understand more and more, week by week, what is pleasing to you and what is not. And so I thank you for this teaching, Abba. And I thank you for opening up our eyes in this time, through this book of Genesis, for us to understand that by the time we get to Abraham, we will have to understand that once again, you are going to again have to start with a set-apart people that are now going to have to be a set-apart people to be able to serve you. And that we will make a decision that we want to be those people that will be set apart unto you. So I praise and I thank you for this in Yahushua's name. Amen.